Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Cook from the Iris Center for Mindfulness, Peace, and Healing. And I'd like to share with you today a short story of a fundamentally important piece of science that without knowing this, without appreciating it and understanding it and applying it in your life, you're already behind the 8 ball in caring for yourself fully. I refer to this as the training effect principle, but you may know it as neuroplasticity or reinforcement learning or experience-dependent learning or reward-based learning, or if you're a biologist or interested in biology, perhaps you understand it as evolution. So to begin with, let's explore the nature of this fundamental principle of the training effect. To the left, you can notice a simple example of a training effect. If I put a 5-pound weight in my hand and start to lift that weight repetitively 5-6 times and do that 5 or 6 times a day and do that every day for a few days, in short order, that muscle will get bigger and stronger, training effect. If I then take that weight away, in a few days, few weeks, that muscle will get smaller again, also a training effect. So the training effect's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. But I am suggesting it's one of the most important things that you can understand and know about and make use of, for the following reasons. Without getting into the nitty-gritty of what's going on inside the muscle fibers for them to change and adapt in that way, I can ask a simple question about this example and use the answer to that question to build a statement of principle that we can then apply in our life. The question I can ask is simply, what's happening in this example? And what's happening is that the muscle is having an experience, lifting. But the experience is coming with a demand, lift 5 pounds more than it's used to. So the muscle adapts to the demand of extra weight and gets bigger and stronger. In the second part of that example, the experience is still lifting, but the demand is now 5 pounds less than it had become used to. So the muscle adapts to the lesser demand and gets weaker again. So the training effect principle becomes just that. Muscles adapt to the demand of experience. I like to think of this as Mother Nature's gift to the universe. It allows systems of all kinds to adapt to their lived experience. Why? Because you'll notice I have muscles in quotation marks. It's not just the muscles of your body that respond in this way, but quite literally all systems. And the training effect principle comes with implications in our life that we cannot avoid. The first implication stems from the fact that the training effect principle starts for us the very moment we're conceived and then never shuts off. So we're always in training mode, always in adaptation mode, always in development mode, whether we know that or not. Another implication is that as we start to collect our lived experiences and we begin to adapt to the demand of those experiences, both experiences from the outside and experiences from the inside, we will naturally begin to adapt to these by the development of patterns of different kinds inside us. Before we're even a year of age, we're beginning to collect patterns in the way we think. These earliest thought patterns, often referred to as internal working models, are about the nature of relationship and tend to get formed and set by the time we're age 2 or 3, and they can guide our behavior and our actions into the rest of our life. We also then begin to collect the do's and don'ts and shoulds and shouldn'ts of life, and then ultimately we begin to collect our belief patterns, what we believe about the world, what we believe about others, what we believe about ourselves, and these beliefs about ourselves ultimately become our egoic personality, our sense of self. We also collect patterns in how we feel, in how we've learned or not learned to tolerate distressing experiences, and how we've learned or not learned to regulate our emotions wholesomely. We collect patterns in how we hold the body, both in its outer postures, but also in its inner postures, its inner workings, its physiology. We collect patterns in how the body's energy forms and flows or doesn't. We collect patterns in how we orient our attention towards the outer world with our five senses or don't, and how we orient towards our inner world and get to know and understand ourselves or don't. And we collect patterns in the way we behave. So all of these patterns come to us as adaptations to our various life experiences on top of whatever genetic predispositions we may have inherited. Yet another implication is these patterns, when they come up and repeat themselves again and again, are like muscles being worked out, so they have a natural tendency to become self-reinforcing and eventually, often in short order, conditioned habits that we just live out of repeatedly again and again. And yet another implication is these patterns don't sit here in isolation. If I think a certain way, I begin to feel a certain way. If I'm feeling a certain way, I think a certain way. If I think and feel a certain way, my body gets held a certain way. I breathe a certain way. My energy flows a certain way. I look at the world a certain way. I look at myself a certain way. I behave and act a certain way. These patterns get what the scientists refer to as being linked or coupled. And each of these arrows representing the linkages, the couplings, are also like muscles. So as these patterns link together, they get more and more tightly knit together. As these patterns fire together, they get wired together. And ultimately we can end up with a bunch of patterns that have become so tightly knit together, they all come up like a package deal. And any one component of the package can trigger the whole package. And anytime the package comes up, it's also getting self-reinforced, and comes another conditioned habit. I like to think of these packaged patterns as global patterns because they don't just affect one aspect of us or all of us. They affect not only us, but the people around us and the world around us as well. And here are some common global patterns that we often see in daily life. There are two biologic patterns that Mother Nature gets all creatures started with, and we as human beings are no different. The scientists tend to refer to these as our approach system or our approach patterns, which Mother Nature gives us with its orientation towards nurture and healing and renewal, growth and development. This pattern is really about saying yes to life, not yes, I like what's here, or yes, I want what's here, but yes, this is what's here. And we turn toward it because we're taking it as an opportunity for nurture, growth, development, and renewal. But we need to feel safe to do that. Mother Nature wants us to be in this opportunity approach system most of the time. The other system is often referred to as our avoidance system, and Mother Nature provides this very specifically as our place for protection, for keeping us alive in the face of real lions. It's about saying no to our life experience, not yes, turning away from it because we see it very particularly as a threat. Mother Nature provided this specifically for our limb and life protection, but one of the characteristics of our own human nature and one of the challenges that we have is that one of these global patterns that we have developed and from very young in life becomes so central to how we see ourselves in the world that our avoidance protection system naturally extends its role from protecting just our life and limb, if you'd like, to protecting this global pattern. And that's the pattern of our egoic personality, our sense of self. Whenever our sense of self is feeling vulnerable, whenever our sense of self is feeling disrespected or devalued, whenever it's not getting what it thinks it needs or wants, or is losing something that it's had and feels is important for it to have, it's not a real lion that's going to do us in 2 or 3 minutes, but our sense of self feels as if we're being exposed in a really vulnerable way. And it turns our stress protection system on, just as if there was a lion in the room. The challenge, of course, is our sense of self is with us full time, not just intermittently and periodically as the lion. And we have a tendency in that regard then to begin to have the avoidance system grow and grow and grow and become more of our conditioned natural pattern. We establish an imbalance between approach and avoidance. The avoidance system was intended to come on for 2 or 3 minutes while we get away from the lion or don't, and then to shut off and allow us the opportunity to return to nurture and healing. So what I invite us to do is to very intentionally make use of the training effect principle to consciously and intentionally guide our development. This means, of course, that we're going to need to choose our patterns, to choose which we're going to focus on and which we're going to build repeatedly over and over and over. And to do that, we clearly need to be able to see our patterns in the first place. We need to recognize what pattern we're in the moment so that we can make wise choices about what pattern is appropriate in the next moment. This is really the domain of our attention and awareness muscles, if you'd like. Our capacities to be really attentive in the moment and to have this metacognitive awareness of our bigger sense of self in the large picture, and is often understood as one of the domains of mindfulness work. So for the purposes of building our own patterns of well-being, making use of the training effect principle to build our awareness of our patterns and making wise choices, predominantly with regard to our approach systems. Thank you so much for listening. I will be sharing more on how we might move forward with making use of the training effect in other short PowerPoint videos.